Hello, welcome to Speech Talk Live. This is episode number 10. Today's August 7th, I believe. August 7th, right. August 7th, 2015. And my name is Jay Oza. And I host this show that we do on a weekly basis. And as you can see, we're now up to episode 10. So we would like what you think of this show. And I do three things. One thing I do is I have my own small consulting practice. I work with mostly small businesses and startups, helping them generate sales mostly in the high tech area. The second thing I do is I'm actually also writing a book on public speaking, primarily like how do you get people to develop the skill outside the course. That seems to be the problem that I've been noticing. So I'm working on this book, and if you're interested, I can send you a copy as a draft when it's completed. And the third thing, obviously, is this course, the show that we do, Speech Talk Live. And I enjoy this thing. We learn a lot. I learn a lot. I get to interact with some outstanding people who participate. And also, it's an opportunity for us to create a lot of content that others can then use any way they want to, whether to learn, whether to provide us feedback or whatever. So if you're watching this is the 10th episode. There's a lot of interesting topics that we have done already that I strongly urge you to take a look at. And you will learn a lot. In fact, when I went back to it, I learned quite a bit just watching this. The reason I do this show is for four reasons. One is to learn, and public speaking is hard. I've been doing this for quite some time, but it's still hard. There's a lot of fear in speaking, and that's natural. And the only way you improve is by doing it. So I'm constantly learning. Learning is a key thing. The second aspect is to teach. I think by teaching what I know, it makes me a better speaker. So that's one of the important things of doing this show, that people who participate have certain level of ability where they're not only learning, but they're also teaching others. So that's a very important aspect of this show. The third is to share. And here today I'm sharing one of my speech that I had done a while back, and I would like to get some feedback from others. But obviously, if you're watching this, the only way you're going to improve is by recording your speech. Once you think you need some real feedback to get to that next level, that's when you want to record it and share it with us, and we can provide you feedback, and as a way to teach others. And the fourth thing I think is very important. This is a support group. We want to support each other. This is a place where when you give a speech, and if it doesn't come across as the way you want it to, you're not going to lose your job. It's not going to affect you in any way. It's a low stakes or no stakes environment. When you're out there at a high stakes environment where it does matter, you want to test it here first before you go and test it somewhere else, before you try it, before you use it somewhere else. So this is a good way to really practice in a very support environment. So that's about it. Today's show, we have three segments. The first segment is going to be facilitated by Soumyan Tirumurthy. And he's picked an interesting topic, which I think we're going to have a nice discussion around, on gestures. I think he's going to focus, I don't know at this point what he's going to focus on, whether it's body language or just the hand gestures. He can, when he does the segment, he'll be able to explain to us what exactly his topic that he has chosen, that he feels that other people need to pay attention to become a more effective speaker. The second segment, as I mentioned, is one of my speeches that I had recorded when I took this Coursera course called Introduction to Public Speaking. And this is an informative speech, and it deals with data and the privacy issue when companies have access to data that they're accumulating from your purchases or your online activities or whatever that you're filling out. So that could be an interesting topic. I'd like to get feedback from Soumyan to see what he thought of that speech and if there's anything I could have done better. And the last segment is we're going to look at a really outstanding speech that was given by an Indian politician. I think he may not be anymore, but he's a member of parliament. His name is Shashi Tharoor. He's quite well known in the Indian a community. He used to, I think, work in the United Nations. I've seen him at the UN. And then he went back and became the member of parliament, which is equivalent to in the United States, our Congress. And he has given the speech about, it's an interesting speech, somewhat academic, about whether Britain should pay. It's an argument he's making, whether the Britain rule of India, was that a good thing or bad thing? If it was a bad thing, should there be a reparations paid? So we'll have a nice discussion around that. So I hope you enjoyed the show. And again, if you have any comments or suggestions on how we can make this better, please let us know, because we want to keep making this better so that it adds value to you. So at this point, I'm going to have Soumyan introduce himself, and then we'll get started with our first segment. Okay, Soumyan, go ahead.
Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Soumyan. I am from Bangalore in India. Bangalore is in the southern part of India, and it is known as the Silicon City here. It's Silicon Valley of India. That means we have a lot of computer industry and software industry here. That's true. And I work for computer peripheral industry in Bangalore. Well, I mean, I'm 67 years old, and I retired about 7 years back. And ever since, I've been mixing a little bit of consultancy and some amount of voluntary work. Among the voluntary activities, I have two. One is as a Wikimedia promoter from the Wikimedia movement. I've been an official also for some 2 years, and I relinquished that post also about a year and a half back. And ever since, I've been a volunteer there. And the other activity, voluntary activity, is this mentorship in Coursera. I have, of course, taken some more courses in Coursera also, mostly on thinking processes and such as model thinking, mathematical thinking, logical thinking, and critical thinking, and so on. The other kind of activities have been on communication, which included English composition as well as public speaking. Okay, so there are other courses which are not relevant for this particular discussion, so we will not get deeper into that. So my topic for today is going to be on public speaking tip, using appropriate hand gestures during a speech. That's what I'm going to talk about. So I would like to now hand it back to Jay before I continue. Jay?
Okay, Soumyan, thanks a lot. So I'm going to take a quick break, and I do this so that when I cut this piece, it comes across like seamlessly. So I'm going to take a couple of second break, and then I'll introduce our segment number one, okay? Okay, welcome to Speech Talk Live, episode number 10. My name is Jay Oza. I'm the host of Speech Talk Live, and we are going to move to segment number one. And segment number one will be facilitated by Soumyan Tirumurthy, based out of Bangalore, India. And he also, besides other things, is a mentor for this Introduction to Public Speaking course offered by Coursera. And he's going to talk about a topic that he's picked, something that I think he's going to go into it on why he's picked it. He's going to explain it on hand gestures. What are the appropriate hand gestures to use? And hand gestures are very important when you're giving a speech. And then after he introduces this, we'll have a discussion around it. So at this point, I'm going to turn this over to Soumyan to take it over and give us some idea what kind of hand gestures we should be using.
Thank you, Jay. Let me straight away get started. Well, all of you know I am Soumyan. This topic on hand gestures is something that has been buzzing in my mind for quite some time. When we went through this course, Professor Matt McGarrity was talking about hand gestures in a very brief video. He covered it in about half of one video. Okay. So I used to think that maybe there must be a lot more to hand gestures and things like that. And perhaps because of the voluminous amount of information that may be there, he has considered this as to some extent out of the scope. And, that's the way he has treated it. So I was always curious to know what more is there related to hand gestures. After all, in my native language, Tamil, if I look at it, the language is split into three parts. We say prose, poetry, and dialogue. Okay, prose is a text, which is grammatically going to be right, etc. Poetry, we do take a little bit of liberty. We look for a rhyme and rhythm and things like that. So to that extent, some jugglery of words has been done. And then dialogue is something which is spoken language, which is not going to be very highly grammatical, etc. And so that is going to be a lot more, communication-oriented style, short, brief phrases, and so on and so forth. You are not going to have too much of a grammar, etc. there. So then, if I look at speech, public speaking seems to come as a derivative from this dialogue process and not really from the prose process. If you take poetry, poetry moved on to singing and then went on to also, combine body language and became drama. Dance. Whereas from dialogue, we can say we can move on to speech, public speech, and then further by adding more of body language, we can move to drama really. So it is somewhere between drama and dialogue. So maybe definitely dramas must have a lot of theory on body language and things like that, and how much is appropriate for public speaking, and why are they not being taught adequately. So that's what I used to wonder. After all, there are directors and they have a way of defining how an actor should show body language. Okay, so there is theory, but how much is appropriate here? What is relevant here? This used to be my point of thinking. One of the, what did Professor McGarity say during his lecture in that half a video that I talked about? What does he talk about? He didn't emphasize too much on hand gestures. He certainly said that, there will be nervous energy in our body, and that will typically show through the inappropriate hand gestures, etc. And we need to be able to reduce the display of that tension, nervousness, and things like that. So it was more of a negative objective. Don't show your nervousness. Okay. Second, he suggested having a dialogue box. Gesture box in front of us. From somewhere from our eye level to somewhere up to our chest level, to the extent our arms can stretch. In that space, you make all your gestures. Don't try to make it closer to your thighs or much above your head and so on and so forth. So he placed a certain zone in which you show most of your gestures. Then third thing is that make whatever gesture that comes naturally to you. Don't really bother too much about what is the appropriate gesture. You really may not be controlling our gesture as much. It's something that comes out much more naturally. Okay, there is very little we may be able to do it, but there was an emphasis that watch your videos and try and avoid whatever is negative, whatever is distracting, whatever is undesirable. This is what he was saying. Well, that much I could understand, but then I was still wondering whether there is something more to it, and whether the field of cinematography and and things like that, they are going to bring in a lot more of it. So that's what I was looking for. Okay, so then let me now look at. I just now described what Professor McGarity talked about. Let me say what is it the audience took away. All the participants in the discussion forum, they have been expressing their views. What do they say? Practically every review of a popular speaker that was there in as part of the course was something that people have commented upon, and most of them made an observation about body language, made an observation about hand gestures. Okay, so however, nowhere was there an outstanding hand gesture or something like that people could recognize. They could recognize something that was distracting, something that was bad, something that is not desirable, but there is nothing as an example of outstanding hand gestures. Okay, so that kind of thing did arise. The same thing happened with the peer review situation also. There isn't a single guy whose hand gestures stood out in such a way that we could say here is a master of hand gestures. We could not say that. But we could definitely identify these guys had a very, very bad hand gesture. Their hand gestures were distracting. So it looks at the end of all this study, it looked as if there is nothing that you can say as a positive, but you have a lot that you have to avoid, which is negative. So that is what seems to come through. This is precisely what Professor McGarity also was saying, and I was trying to correlate my observations with what he was saying, and this is what came out. Now, I wanted to also see what does the world say about it. I went and searched for hand gestures in on YouTube and generally Googled for it and looked at many resources, both text and videos. I picked up some top 5 videos from this and posted it on the Google Communities Forum, where we are talking about introduction to public speaking. In that forum, I posted that. Well, I mean, it is interesting that the 5 videos emphasized on 5 different aspects, and even though they had some kind of commonality, they also were showing different facets of this. So that is interesting. I would urge all of you to go and watch those things. I'm not going to describe every one of them. I'm going to only narrate some takeaways from that. What I found from this is there is no science based on gestures that has to be learned and followed. Okay, everybody keeps on saying that, look, you can have a practice, you can do a natural hand gesture. There may be some bad postures and bad gestures, etc. You identify them and eliminate them. So in your peer review process, you need to say what kind of a distracting bad habits you have got in terms of hand gestures and try to screen them out. That's the focus. Rather than say, look, this is an appropriate gesture, use it in this forum. And there is also an emphasis like that, look, don't keep on repeating the same hand gesture over and over again. That could be also a distracting factor. Well, I remember in my college days, one of our chemistry professors used to, always make a gesture. He will hold a cup to hand. He will say one ingredient will be added, yet another ingredient you bring and add, and you go and stir. Okay, mix. So he used to mix so many chemicals in this kind of formation and rub them on his palm that we used to joke, saying that, look, very soon he will get a hole in the palm. Okay, so that kind of thing. So it can be highly distracting when some of these kind of hand washes are done. Somebody starts counting how many times did he rub this way. The guys are not focusing on learning a lesson, and then they start counting on these kind of trivial things. This is a classic case of distraction that can happen. So repeating something is also not a good thing. So you can avoid that. Now. Just a minute. Okay, so that's a key aspect. Then I was trying to look for something which is more of a positive suggestion than rather than saying don't do this. Okay, so don't do this seems to be very simple to talk about, but I was looking for something which is positive. Okay. I'm sorry about this. Okay, so there are some suggestions. There is a video clip from Toastmasters. Now they don't really say that you can do this. They are sort of trying to classify hand gestures into some 4 categories. First category they seem to identify is you can have some descriptive gestures. Something that says something is small, something is big, large, tall, short, those kind of things you can express by hand. Something is a square, cube, okay, circular. Those kind of gestures can be shown. So that is one kind of thing. You can even count 1, 2, 3, etc. The other kind of gesture is emphasis. Sometimes we may hold a clenched fist and show anger by banging it on another palm and say that how can this happen? Okay, those are the kind of some of the simple things that one can do. The third one can be some suggestive gestures. You can shrug your shoulders and say, look, what can I do? Or you can show some facial expressions, etc. Okay, so you may even say thumbs up or thumbs down. Those kind of things, or stop. Those are the kind of things we can do. Those are some of these gestures. And the last one is gestures related to prompting. Suppose you want to invite your audience to say, look, how many of you agree with me? Raise your hands. Okay, you are trying to invite them to give a feedback. By raising your hands, you are also prompting them to raise their hands. Okay, this is a prompting gesture. So these are the 4 types of gestures that are talked of. However, they also say, look, don't overdo these gestures. Do whatever comes naturally to you. And these are just classifications and types to understand in what context people use it. Don't try to stuff your speech with all this kind of artificial gestures. You'll never be able to have adequate amount of control on these things. And so make sure that you understand what these gestures are about, to think about it, but just do a moderate degree of hand gesture. doing less hand gesture may not be as distracting as making excessive amount of irrelevant gestures. People emphasize you must do a purposeful gesture. That is what they keep saying again and again. So this is what I found as what the word says about hand gestures. Okay, there is a lot more of emphasis on body language, other things like movement and eye contact. Eye contact is very heavily emphasized. Movement is something that people are looking at with caution. Movement apparently is the next stage. Once you have mastered your hand gesture, you can move around the stage. Moving around the stage, jumping around the stage could be seen as a sign of nervousness. So maybe in the initial stage, it's a good thing for us to go and stay someplace, use maybe some 4 or 5 feet of space to go around, and move that even within that, move purposefully rather than aimlessly keep swaying to the left or right, etc. Not make these kind of body gestures. See, the moment you make action speaks louder than word. This is one proverb that is there. So when we are making some action, our hand or something like that moves, our body moves, there is a lot more attention that attracts than the speech that goes into our ears. Okay, so it is better to moderate this. Let the action not be a distraction. Let it not overtake what you are trying to communicate. So that is what is being emphasized in all the videos. So this is what I took away from these things. Okay, so I think at the end of it, the bottom line is whatever Professor Matt McGarity talked about in the video lectures was all that you have to do. You don't have to really do much as a new hand gesture. Act naturally. Do what comes to you very naturally. Have this gesture box in which you do it. Don't do it outside, too much outside this gesture box. Limit your hand gestures within it. Make a gentle approach. Have some open palms and things like that, which is inviting. That kind of a thing. There is more emphasis to be placed on what is to be avoided. Have a review, and anything that is distracting, please avoid that. And you show your confidence and things like that through your posture. So that is the primary takeaway. Okay, so this is what I have garnered by investigating a lot more into hand gestures as a topic. Definitely, it doesn't seem to go all the way towards cinematography and movie direction and things like that. In public speaking, there is always an emphasis on moderating these hand gestures and making them relevant to the context. So that's what it is. Thank you.
Yeah, that was excellent. Yeah, I completely agree. And let me just stand because I'll sometimes you have to stand to make it. So one of the things, hand gestures are a very interesting topic. There was a woman who did some sort of a research, and what she found was she looked at the TED Talk speakers. Her name, I'll include the link. Her name is Vanessa Van Edwards, and she studies body language. She's got some sort of like a lab she has set up called Science of People, where she studies body language. And she did some sort of a research for TED Talks. And what she found was that on average, at the bottom end, she said was 272. Like, TED speeches are about 15 minutes long, just only 15 to 18 minutes long. She basically found 272 gestures. That's at the bottom level. Some of the top speeches, like Simon Sinek and Temple Grandin, that went all the way up to 600. So hand gestures are very important if you are for in a speech. And one of the things that I recommend, like one thing that Soumyan said is very important. Just don't wildly use hand gestures because it can be very distracting. Like if I just go like this, I mean, if I just start doing things that are not consistent with what I'm saying, then it's going to be distracting. But if it is very consistent with the point that I'm making, then the hand gestures is essentially communicating a message that I'm trying to convey. And there are certain, like I was watching, they had a debate here in the United States, we have a presidential election. There is a candidate named Donald Trump. And it was interesting. This guy's a businessman, real macho type. Every time there was a question asked, his initial, before the moderator finished the question, he would always, this was his hand gesture. Every question he would start out like that. Now, like, I don't know, the way I interpret that hand gesture, remember, he hasn't even said anything, but the question is being asked, and he would be like, okay, so what's the big deal? Like what's the big deal? That's how I'm interpreting it. It's like, he's not saying that. He's just like, okay, so like what's the big deal about that, right? And he's communicating with that hand gesture, like, hey, I'm a businessman. Like, why are you even asking me this question? Like what's the big deal about this? And he's communicating a lot. One of the other things I'll point out to people is that when you are giving a speech, always be welcoming. This is a very good hand gesture, palms open. One thing that people say you should avoid, even though I noticed it in the debate last night, that some people, it's hard to avoid, is this. Like, even if you're people do not like to be pointed at, okay? Even though you're harmless, but if I just say, hey, you better listen to my point. What I'm telling you is really important, right? And immediately you're going to get like, wait a second, why is he pointing at me? So avoid that. One of the things that somebody coached Bill Clinton, he used to do that. And they said, instead of that, use this. Like, so he would take a thumb and then just go like that. Hey, I want to make a point. And then if you notice Bill Clinton, he'll never do this. He'll always, that's hard. When you're giving a speech, sometimes you're not going to be able to control your hand gestures. So the best way is what I'm doing right now. I'm looking at myself and I'm watching my hand gestures. Now, right now I'm on a camera and I can see, but the best thing to do is record your video and look at the hand gestures. Are your hand gestures way out of line? Is it helping you communicate, or is it detracting from your message? And if it's communicating, then make sure you use the hand gestures. If it's getting in the way of conveying your message, then change it. Because when somebody is going to see you, they're going to notice the hand gestures. They're going to pay more attention to your hand gestures than what you're saying. So hand gestures is extremely important. And I'll give you some additional information here. According to that research, they found that it's not what you say, but how you say it. And the key thing, the message that this woman pointed out, was that you have to focus on your nonverbal just as much as your verbal. So hand gestures are very important. You really have to integrate it with what you're saying. And if you're just focusing on your verbal and not focusing on your nonverbal, remember, when you're speaking, you're occupying a stage. You're in a leadership role, and people are able to process more by what you're not saying. So hand gestures become extremely important, just like the voice. And before you even get to the message, people have already made a decision on what your speech is going, whether they're going to like your speech. And that happens very quickly, very early on. I think we had discussed it in one of the sessions, in the first 7 seconds. So you really, to close this out before I hand it over to Soumyan, is record your speech and see what kind of hand gestures you're using. And ask people, what do you think? Just ask somebody to just focus on the hand gestures part only, because that's what your audience is going to notice first before you even get to your message. Any closing thoughts on that?
Those are good points, Jay. I definitely think that these are important issues. I also watched that particular video that you are talking about, the one who has studied the TED Talks and things like that. Yes, that welcoming hand gesture, the open arms and things like that are emphasized by most of the other articles also. So it looks like, the body language becomes a little dominant in terms of perception. Though we don't want that to become so dominant. Otherwise, we would perhaps be preferring the drama type of communication, where body language really becomes highly dominant. Here, we don't want body language to dominate so much. We want more focus to be on the content. So there is a lot of suggestion, moderation. Body language that way seems to be fairly strong. It gives a lot of subtle cues. In fact, there is one article I was trying to look for. They say somebody has gone to do a research to try and trace where did this hand gesture as a attribute coming. So they went in to investigate up the genealogical tree, and they went right up to the fish stage. It seems the fish, when they flap their fins, they actually are doing a non-verbal communication. Okay, so it seems that is where the trait of making gestures came to that's the origin of the trait of making gestures, and that is what seems to have come to the right up to the human stage. So that is one of the theories is going around. Okay.
Okay, I think we're pretty much done with this segment, so I'm going to take a short pause. And again, to close it out, work on the hand gestures, because if you're not noticing it, your audience is going to notice it. So, like I said, the best thing to do is record your video and then look for the hand gestures. That's what I do. Like when we're recording this, when I watch it, I'll look and say, my God, that hand gesture made no sense. So pay particular attention to the hand gestures you're using, and work on it like it is a speech. Hand gestures should be integrated like a speech, like a message. What is the hand gesture message you want to convey once you have that message? Because sometimes that is going to communicate more. Anyway, I'm exaggerating here, but this is a way you start practicing it so that it becomes natural. All right, I'm going to take a brief pause and then we'll start segment 2. Okay. Okay, welcome to Speech Talk Live. This is episode number 10. My name is Jay Oza, and we're moving to segment number 2. And in this segment, we are going to review a speech. In this case, it's my speech that I had recorded for this Introduction to Public Speaking course. And this is an informative speech. And the information that I'm trying to inform others has to do with data. How companies, first of all, why companies want to collect data, and then how are they collecting data, and what do they do with this? Like, what kind of information are they able to gather from the data, and why data has become so important to companies. As some people have called it, I don't know if it was Gartner, that data is the oil of our generation, because there is a lot of hidden asset, hidden value in the data that companies are sitting on, and they want to collect more and more. And what makes this possible is that memory is free, not free, it's very cheap. Memory is pretty much inexpensive, so the companies can collect a lot of data. And then today, with powerful computers and also algorithms, sophisticated analytical algorithms, they are able to derive a lot of interesting information, insight from the data that they're collecting. So this talk that I give here, so let me just give you a little overview. It focuses on, I kept the focus to just one particular example, and it has to do with, it's kind of a dated example, but you may have come across this somewhere else. It has to do with Target. It's a big retailer, like Walmart. And they evidently sent some information about baby products to this young woman, and the father evidently got ticked off, saying, why is my daughter getting all that? She's a teenager. And according to the story, he goes and confronts the manager nearby at the Target, Minneapolis, and says, why are you sending? He didn't know. As it turns out, the marketing department was doing it. And as it turned out, that based on her shopping habits, they had figured out that most likely this young woman probability was very high that she was pregnant. And indeed she was. But that raises a lot of issues on privacy issues. And also, this was a topic that Latesh kind of addressed when he gave his speech, when we reviewed his speech, but he didn't go into in a lot of detail about identity and all that. Because so I thought this was a good idea to include that, because this speech just focuses on how company, in a particular example, and how companies are able to capture your data. Everything you're doing right now, even what we're doing here, is being captured by Google, and they're going to somehow can use this information and target us in a specific way. So it is somewhat scary, because these programs are all running on our computer that are just interested in capturing data, because that itself is worth more to them than even sometimes the program. So like Google and Facebook and all of these other companies, they are free, but they're not free. The reason they're free is because the information that we are posting, whether it's on Twitter, whether it's YouTube, Facebook, even Google, when we do search, all that information is being used to market to us. So that information is getting captured, and they can pretty much figure out what our purchasing habits are, what our interests are, and that information then can be sold to companies and saying, hey, if you want to sell, let's say, because I like to learn, so they know that my habits are to learn about any educational courses, but they can even specifically pinpoint that the kind of courses that I will probably like would be more in the area of business related, science, things like that, computers, high tech, things like that, and sales, marketing. So they can directly pinpoint what I'm likely to buy. So the companies will then be able to market to me. So anyway, that was the whole point of the speech. And overall, what I thought of that speech is, I did quite a bit of research on that. I kind of mentioned at the end that I read two books. One was a book called Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg, and the other one was a book on big data. So out of all that, I condensed it to, I think the speech was like less than 10 minutes long. So I included all that and condensed it into that one, and used that initial example to capture audience's attention. And then I explained to them on how they do it. And I used like one of the techniques, correlation. I'm not sure how well I did that. Maybe that part needs to be done better. I'll find out from Soumyan what he thinks. So anyway, at this point, Soumyan, I'll hand it off to you to give me your, what do you think I did well in that speech? And what are some of the things you think that if I were to give that live or re-record it, what do you think I need to improve upon?
Well, Jay, I went through that video. It was a complementary thing to the content with Latesh discussed the previous week, where he did not give a very specific example and discuss that. Your focus was very much on this major example. I also heard of this Target store story, which perhaps first appeared a couple of years back. And that was quite a shocking thing to me at that time, that people could go and discover so much about individual. Well, I mean, in recent times, I have also done many courses on the algorithms for data mining and related things. More of algorithm courses. I had not done any practicing of data mining, but just generally try to understand what this science is all about. Well, I mean, one can definitely say that these are all covariances, based on which they try to understand. Maybe because of the sheer magnitude of data that is there, they are able to find out these kind of insights, which a human would not be able to, so easily decipher. Okay, so that's a little interesting. People can find this kind of covariances and things like that. Definitely, there is also a saying that correlation is not causation. So, there is also another major handicap all this data mining people have. If my login ID and things like that are used by family members who don't really go and make a separate login account and things like that, they go and browse. When I have logged into a system, to a browser on my with my login, then the system could get a very confusing kind of signal. Okay, they will perhaps find that I have logged in, but then what I'm browsing is not same as what my family members are browsing, and they can get confused. Okay, so that kind of thing is very much possible. So to the extent that many of us, at least in India and all, we don't have a personally identifiable IP address doesn't become available to them unless they have put a cookie, and most of these studies have to be based on cookies. And as long as we have dynamic IP, which is assigned to us every time we log in, and that becomes different, that also is another factor with which people can get confused. I still feel that, notwithstanding this target store story, online browsing situation is still highly muddled, is my thinking. Target store did not do it based on online study. Target store based it on whatever was being purchased with a particular individual. So to that extent, they were looking at the purchase bills and trying to do a correlation. So that, I think, is very much different. Perhaps that kind of scare in the online browsing environment is a little far away. I think the biggest confounding factor is they really cannot be sure as to who is browsing under whose login. Okay, so that's the problem. Anyway, it is perhaps people will figure out some way of making sense out of this. Also, they will perhaps dig deeper and use technologies will develop to be able to separate out this mix-ups. Okay, so that may be another story, new story. I've also heard of organizations such as LinkedIn and Facebook and all, which contain a lot of personal information. Apparently, employees try to find out about their employees' activities on these websites. Those kind of things seem to be infringing on privacy issues to me much more than what these traders are trying to push. At least the traders are trying to push something which you are likely to buy. There is a correlation, and they think that you are going to buy it. So I think that's not so much of a harmful thing. But then, if some employer is trying to infer whether I am creditworthy or not based on my friends in Facebook, then I think that's much more dangerous. I have no control on those kind of situations.
Yeah, as far as the speech was concerned, what do you have any specific comments on, like, certain things? Because again, that was a 10-minute speech, and I focused on just that one example and used that as a way to raise an issue. I mean, it wasn't supposed to be comprehensive. It was just supposed to be like, hey, the audience, maybe I didn't mention, the audience that I was targeting are people who probably didn't know that much about it. So this was not geared towards people who are currently working in the big data field. This was for people who are like, hey, I didn't know that companies could do that every time I'm purchasing. I think people today understand this, but they don't understand that how much of this information that we're giving away is essentially being used in some ways by these companies to target us. And not to use the pun, target, but they're targeting us as a potential customer. And in this particular example, they knew that if you're pregnant, then you are at the top, because you're going to be really purchasing a lot of things in a short time for the next year or two or even longer. And if you can develop, they're trying to get you to develop a habit. So if they keep sending you these, remember this, there's a lot of stuff in that that speech that you cannot cover in 10 minutes. But what they're trying to do is that they want you to develop that habit gradually. So after a while, once you have developed a habit, your brain is not even thinking, right? Hopefully we've developed a habit of getting on Friday to do this show. So it's Friday comes, you're like, oh, okay, I'm going to go on and do this show. That's a habit, right? And that's what they're doing. Once they collect the data, then they target you and saying, oh, okay, I'm going to keep sending you these coupons. Initially, you feel like, oh, it's a freebie. Then gradually they'll increase it. It's not going to be free anymore. It's going to be, you're going to pay for it. And after a while, you're going to purchase more and more. Before you know it, I'll give you a perfect example of that is cell phone. If you look at it, people spend a lot of money on two things that in the old days they didn't spend that much money on. Here in the United States, I don't know about India. India must have something comparable. but in America, people spend a lot of money on cable TV. Like I was just talking to my mother the other day, and she has to watch all these programs from India, ZTV, or all of these programs. I don't even know, Sky. She's got so many, and her bill per month, from what I get, when I was talking to her, was something like $150 a month. Okay, then so that's just the cable part. Then you take a look at the smartphone, right? Like an iPhone or an Android. The data part and then apps and all that adds up very quickly to the point that people are spending probably close to, I look at our cell phone bill because all the kids now have their phones. We're spending quite a bit of money every month on that. I think it's about $400 a month when you add up everybody's plan. So the part of this is just, it's a habit. Even if you're using it or not, it's just developed into a habit. And these companies know that once they have that habit developed, then that's it. They got you. They got you for a long time, and it's hard to break that habit. So that's why this data, like somebody would ask, like, why would they want to go through all this, and why would they use all this technology and store all this information? And it's because, I mean, that's one of the reasons why Google is such a profitable company. Same thing with Amazon. I mean, there's some good side to it, but the main thing they're trying to do is they're looking after their interest, which is, hey, I know this guy and I know what he likes. If I keep on giving him what he wants, then he'll keep on buying. And after a while, it's such a habit forming that he's not even going to think how much it's really costing him. So
true. That's the biggest kind of a fallout that can be there. Well, I mean, your speech was good. It's a good informative speech. You talked about this particular case, and you focused only on this case. That's perhaps, Latish tried to cover the entire gamut of data-related risk, etc. You didn't go into the wide range. You focused on one particular example, and that was a good comprehensive coverage of that particular example. So that is something that people could understand fully from that video. That was good speech.
Okay, great. So at this point, let's close this out and we'll get to segment 3. Okay, thanks for your feedback. Okay, this is Jay. Hey, can you mute your line? Because otherwise it's switching back and forth. Okay, thanks. Hello. Welcome to Speech Talk Live. This is episode number 10, and we're moving to segment number 3. And in this segment, we're going to look at a speech given by a famous person. The person that gave the speech, his name is Shashi Tharoor, and he's a very popular member of the Indian Parliament. He's a member of the Parliament. And prior to that, I believe he may have other things he has done. He used to work in the United Nations. I don't know exactly what his title was. So he's well known. And he has given this speech that I've included, and it has to do with, I think it gives us at Oxford. It's an academic setting. And the speech is about reparations. Should Britain owe any kind of reparations to its former colonies for the number of years that they occupied or colonized these nations and took away a lot of the wealth from these countries. And I thought his speech was excellent. I think he's an excellent speaker. You can tell right away that this is not some amateur. This guy is a real professional when it comes to giving a public speech. And he had it really well organized. And here are some of the things that I liked about this speech. I mean, I don't think there was anything I didn't like about it. The main thing is, it was a fun speech to listen to. And I think he did that extremely well. He kept that speech very entertaining, and also it was filled with very good content too. There was a lot of history involved here. I like the way he started the speech. He injected humor, which I thought was very effective when he says that about comment about Henry VIII, and you can see the audience laugh. I think once he does that, he pretty much had the audience at that point. So it's a very good technique that we could all learn from on how he starts his speech. Because once you get that done, then you know the rest of it is going to go smoothly. So he essentially had the audience right from the get-go, that joke about Henry VIII. Then he goes into giving all kinds of statistics about how India, before Britain colonialization, was GDP was like 23%, and then afterwards, after they left, it was 4%. So Indian economy took a big hit from the British rule. And he goes and explains all of these things about all the injustices, and he gives all the, what he's doing in the speech is like potential objections that people will have. Hey, but you got democracy, and he has an answer for that. Hey, what about all the railways that Britain built? And again, he has an answer for that. That all of these were not for India. These were essentially for Britain. The railways were not done to benefit the people. It was essentially for the economic interest. So then he goes about what India contributed during the occupation or the colonialization, especially their contribution during the two wars, World War I and World War II. And the whole thing is he goes on and he explains all this in a very content-heavy talk, and he does it in a very in a manner that is very easy to listen to, because he has a really a point of view here that contrary to what others may think, who may have forgotten, like, hey, look how India did so well because of the British rule. And he's saying, no, you're not looking at it the right way. Let me show you what you're not understanding, what it did. Who knows if that hadn't happened, where we would be. And then again, his whole point is that the point is not that he's looking for a reparation. He's saying that at least give us an apology for that. That first of all, he's trying to convince people that the colonialization was not a good thing. It was a bad thing, and he's not looking for trillions and trillions of dollars. That's going to be hard to quantify at this point. But hey, at least acknowledge that the colonialization. And I'm not sure that is an argument. I don't know, maybe Soumya, you may know more about this, about how people in India. But one thing I will tell you that this is nothing to do with the content of it, is that he doesn't address some of the other aspect of the colonialization. And again, I don't know whether he had the time, because this is a pretty big topic, is that colonialization was not only the result of Britain. There was a lot of collusion that took place within India. India was in a disarray because India was not a united country. There were a lot of different princely states. So it made it very easy for Britain to colonialize India, because India was so divided that it didn't take much for them to pick off each of the princely states and divide the population in such a way that they were able to rule for like over 200 years, which is amazing that so few people could rule a country for that many years because of the way they divided the country. So overall, I thought there's a lot you can learn from this speech. He is directly speaking to the people. He has a very good command of the topic, and he also does it in a manner that you can tell that this person is a very polished speaker. So overall, I thought it was an excellent speech. And at the end, afterwards, I'll tell you the difference that I see between that speech was a very British speech, and I will compare and contrast that with a typical American speech. So I'll let me know what you thought of this, and then.
Yeah, see, I just also went through this speech, and I also made some search for some more references, etc. Shashi Tharoor actually was Under Secretary General in the United Nations. He contested for the post of Secretary General against Ban Ki-moon, and finally Ban Ki-moon won the election and he lost it. After he lost it, he left UN and came back to India and joined politics. Okay, so that's political history. Second is on this video itself. This video went viral, and within 3 weeks, it touched 2.8 billion views. Okay, so in the Oxford Union Society is a debating society. In that, they have something like 20 million views totally. They have listed the top 5 videos which have logged about 1.8 million or more. Some of them have been there for nearly 2 years, but this is the one which touched 2.8 billion and stands at the #1 ranking, and it has reached that within 3 weeks. So that is some sort of a record for them, it looks. Okay, that's one. Then, this was a debate. Apparently, a number of speakers were there. Shashi Tharoor says that he is the 7th speaker, the last speaker in this lot. And so when he comes in as a last person, there's going to be perhaps a certain amount of fatigue with the audience. There's perhaps going to be some amount of points being repeated by many people. And he also has the responsibility to do rebuttal to many of the other previous speakers. So that really makes this an impromptu speech. He is not only talking about a subject that has been given to him, but also referring to some points which are mentioned by some of the predecessors and trying to use that to make a counterpoint and bring about a conclusion. If he's the last speaker for his team, there are 2 people who are divided: those who say yes and those who say no. And for his team, it is almost like in a sprint team, the last guy is the one who is going to do the finishing. So he comes in like a finisher and finishes it beautifully. So that's a kind of role he has played. And what happened to the result? In a separate interview, which is not there as part of this video, it's given to a TV channel in India. He has said that they won 189 to 56. So 189 said yes and 56 said no. Okay, so that means 189 people agreed, yes, reparations perhaps should be given. Okay, at least it must be acknowledged that reparations are a fair demand. Okay, that kind of conclusion. Well, that's about it. Well, talking about the other thing, I was a little surprised that every time I see these statistics that India had some 33% of world trade in the earlier era, that somehow looks a little unbelievable to me. Now, for one, India was never a single country. I don't think there would have been any statistics, etc. It was hundreds of princely states. So if somebody were to say India had a certain amount of trade, they have to agglomerate all this and then talk about trade. Okay, so there would have been a lot of trade within these princely states also. You need to counter them, deduct them and say what went outside this group. More like, what is the trade between European Union and other, countries without counting intra-European Union trade. Okay, so it's a fairly challenging thing. Fine, notwithstanding that in the early days, there was perhaps a lot more of demand for spices and things like that. Perhaps the traditional, world trade toppers of today, such as petroleum and electronics and things like that, were not the biggest commodities in those days. It was perhaps textiles and spices and things like that, which perhaps was a thing that gave India an edge at that time. So that's one observation I have. Then he had about 8 minutes to talk, but he actually took about 15 minutes. The video is about 15 minutes long. So obviously, everybody around the world has the same problem. They have a targeted time, but then they exceed it. Since he, came in as a last speaker and had to do a lot of rebuttal, I think that was allowed. There was not much of a discussion on that. Nobody seems to, ring a bell and try to stop him. Well, I mean, practically everybody in that talk. I mean, I watched many other talks of this Oxford Union Society also, and many of these people use handwritten notes, and they practically carry with them. They don't seem to bother about memorizing, because it's such an impromptu speech. In the last minute, people jot down points. They don't have enough time to memorize. They really don't want to get into that kind of mess. So they do carry a slip of paper and write down their points in their hand. This is something that many people who say that they forgot a point or whatever it is, or they feel a little hesitant about carrying a note, something like that, they can draw some kind of consolation from. Then, of course, he did a little bit of this is more like a persuasive speech. So I would say a lot of linguistic jugglery was also done. There is some amount of ad hominem also I could see. For example, he tried to take a dig saying that if the sun doesn't set on the British Empire, it is because the God himself does not believe the Britishers. To say that they did a loot of this country and God did not believe them in the dark, something like that. So that is anyway hitting below the belt kind of allegation. There is no established proof. These are all linguistic ways of trying to establish a point. Okay, so he did quite a few of these kind of jibes. Okay, so that's that is something. Finally, this had a lot of impact in India. There was, perhaps this thing went viral because among Indians this was a very popular thing where people were, sharing it with their friends and others. Then the Prime Minister of the country, Narendra Modi, who belongs to another party, which is opposed to Shashi Tharoor's party. They are not loggerheads, but still, Narendra Modi had a lot of things to praise Shashi Tharoor for this speech. He made a very particular mention about this speech by Shashi Tharoor and congratulated him. So that is a very odd event for Indian politicians to do to their counterparts. I mean, to their political enemies. Okay, so that's one key factor. Shashi Tharoor himself attributed this popularity of this talk to the nationalism which it touched upon. For practically all Indians, irrespective of the party, this appealed because it appealed to their nationalism and not to any other political ideology. Okay, so that was another key point. Shashi Tharoor also made yet another observation in that interview. He said that after the talk was over, there are many opponents, who publicly had taken a different position on this subject. They called him up and talked to him and congratulated him. And he said, look, I must confess and acknowledge that, what I call as the British sense of fair play was very much in evidence. And a lot of these people, even though they have taken a public posture of a different nature, they did congratulate him and they did acknowledge what he said was a very fair thing to ask. Okay, so that's something that he mentioned. Well, I mean, this speech suddenly became quite popular and viral. But one interesting factor was Shashi Tharoor himself did not think that this was his best speech. Apparently, he says, look, I made another speech in the Indian Parliament on juvenile justice. Okay, so that is something I thought was a much more passionate speech where I did a much better job. But then that did not even get any views or any comments. Not even in Parliament. It was sort of just another speech that was made, and everybody seemed to really ignore. The media did not latch onto it. Nothing happened to it. Okay, so his disappointment was there is a better speech that he gave, but then it went unrecognized because the forum was Indian Parliament, where nobody really seemed to make much out of that. So these are the other additional observations I have to say about this particular video.
Yeah, the last point, I'll comment on that. When he said that he didn't think this was his best speech, I think your speech is really, the metrics is not determined by you, it's determined by your audience, right? So if this one touched, you mentioned he's had 2.8 million views. The audience is saying that we were moved by, how many?
2.8.
2.8, right?
Okay.
2.8 million. Yeah, so 2.8 million is a lot, right? Because an average YouTube video will not even get if you get 1,000 views, that's considered really good. So I haven't got any of my video to even get close to 100 yet. One is close, 92 or something. But 100 is good, but 1,000 is even better. But that's it. Most of them, if you ever check it, the popular ones kind of spoil you, right? Like they get millions and 20 millions, 100 million, billion, whatever. Those are rare. Those are like real viral. And if you got 2.8 million, that means that based on just the number of views, this speech really hit a nerve. It resonated with the people. So when he says that his best speech nobody even cared about, well, that just goes to show that maybe that speech he liked it because he's showing how smart he is. This speech is basically he's making us smarter about understanding this issue in a way that many of us probably didn't understand it. Hey, there is a lot here about the colonialism and the injustice and the economic destruction, economic destruction that took place during the colonial rule, and but many probably didn't know that. And I think that's why the point I'm making is that when you give a speech, it's not whether you like it, it's what the audience likes. That's the one that you're not giving a speech for yourself. Otherwise, just record it and just keep watching it. Once you put it out there, it's the audience that counts. So when he says that he's got other speech that were better, I think that's not, that comment doesn't go anywhere, because the purpose of a speech is not for you, it's for your audience. The other thing is, I mean, he's a very accomplished speaker. Obviously, he's very well educated, and I'll touch upon one thing. This is something that I noticed between, and it's a matter of style, but it's a very important point. I kind of look at Modi as a speaker in the mold of an American speaker. Modi is more like an American speaker. The Shashi Tharoor speech comes across like he's a traditional British speaker. Like, this is what a British speaker would look like. If you want to say, okay, what would a typical British speaker speech would look like? Outstanding British speech. I would put Shashi Tharoor. Modi's speech is very much like an American speech. And the reason is that an American speakers like Reagan and Lincoln, and even if you go back even farther, Benjamin Franklin, they use a lot of this homespun logic, like stories. They're very much into parables and stories to make a larger point. That's the style. That's the typical American style of speaking. I didn't see any of that in this speech. This speech was just simply facts presented in a very clever and insightful way. And there were a lot of, like you said, there are quotes throughout. Like he said, we paid for our own oppression. Very effective. Then I think this one you mentioned. And then he also had Churchill wrote something down about Gandhi. Why hasn't Gandhi died yet? Very effective. Then the one that you pointed out about why the sun doesn't set, he said, God couldn't trust the English in the dark. Very effective. So he had all of these in there. The thing, and it's very effective, but when I'm comparing that to if an American speaker gave a speech, like let's say Ronald Reagan, he would have a parable. That's how his style was. And the purpose of it was that he wanted to touch the person at the common denominator was much lower. He would not put a lot of the facts and stuff. There would be enough facts, but that's not what would win the day. It would be these simple stories, parables that had to support the larger message. So I just wanted to kind of point that out, that it's a matter of style, and not saying that one is good over the other. You got to know your audience. That's the key. So when you're speaking, this is just maybe for your point. If you're speaking to an American audience, you want to come up with a story that it's so general that it'll resonate, and then make your larger point around that one story. Then Americans get it quickly. And again, there was an article I pointed, it was a Harvard Business Review, and this is a very important point. You know, we all think like that because I'm giving a speech, it's going to work in every setting. It doesn't. The way Americans follow a speech is it's like get to the main point and then that's it. Get to the main point, right? But if you're speaking to a let's say a European audience, you can't get to the main point right away. You have to build it up logically. It's X, Y, Z. Oh, now this is why. That's how they are taught. That's how they're brought up. If you just get to the main point and saying, well, let me just get you to the main point and then that's it, they're going to be disappointed. That's not what they're used to. So there was a book written by this woman. She's a professor. I forgot her name. I'll include that. And also she had written an article in Harvard Business Review. And she was pointing that out, that a lot of businessmen who from America, when they go to Europe, let's say France or maybe Russia, if their speech is not specifically adapted to that environment, to that setting, that speech will come across as like, wait a second, you just made a big point, but he never explained how he got to that. It doesn't work there. In America, similarly, if a European came to America and started going on and saying, okay, let me start with this, let me start, then they're going to get bored very quickly. They have to understand how the American mind thinks, processes information. And similarly, we also need to understand how the European and Asian mind processes information. And it's not the same. And that's one of the things that that people, like if you listen to Shashi Tharoor's speech, he's building an argument. You see that? He's building an argument. Like, here's what happened. Here's what happened. Here's World War I. Here's World War II. Here's what happened, what Churchill did to Gandhi. There's like a clear, if this speech was given by, let's say, a similar experience in America, because we have the same issue here, right, with African Americans. They're also saying, hey, there should be reparations. There are always arguments going back and forth. And that argument is going to be given much differently than the way, same speaker, let's say Shashi Tharoor were to come to America and give a speech about the American experience around slavery. The way he's given that speech would not work effectively in an American setting, American audience. American audience would tell him like that slavery was bad because of look at what's happening now. And then he may have to go into a little bit more detail. The main point had to be brought up right in the beginning. And it's something which we can discuss at another time on how to organize the speech for the audience, for the country that in which you're giving that speech in. It's not the same. So so overall, I thought this was, I learned a lot. I'm going to go and watch it again. If there was an entire program, if you have a link for that, I'd like to see the entire debate, because all I got to see was just the Shashi Tharoor's part only. I didn't get to see what the other speakers had said.
Yeah, in fact, I went to the Oxford Union Society website just to be able to see whether I can see other videos. Unfortunately, it was not there, or at least I could not search for it effectively. I mean, anything that has been spoken there, I think must have had a recording. In a discussion column, somebody had even asked, but then there was no response to that question. So it would have been interesting to see what all the 7 people spoke about in this subject.
Okay, all right. I think that's closes it out. So I'll just take a brief pause and then we'll close out this show. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you. Bye.
All right. So we're done. Any closing comments?
Yeah. Today was. I mean, we had some 3 interesting subjects. I think the Shashi Tharoor talk was something that. I had a lot more notes, but then, I thought it is not possible to get into each and every point and discuss. So he definitely made a fantastic speech. I think this speech was the highlight of the day, and it was another good day.
When I post it, when I post it, if you want to add more comments to it, that's one of the things I do. Once I post it, if you want to continue the discussion, then just go and add some of the comments that you didn't get a chance to.
No, I will do that. I will.
Okay. All right. Next week we'll look at Julie's speech. I told her that what she has is enough right now. Don't spend too much time. So we'll review her speech. All right. I'll talk to Marie and I'll let you know what I find out. Okay.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.
Good night.
Good night.